Ready?
Everything's going.
Okay.
Everything's going already? Okay.
Going.
No,
Do we need to clap?
it's
Do we
recording
need to clap?
already.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Kola.
Hey, Jeff. It's been kind of a crazy year, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Been a crazy year.
Man, it's been a long year.
Yeah, and we're celebrating the church's 52nd anniversary.
We are. So, yeah, that's been crazy. It's been 2 years already since I've been back. So I always count because I came during the 50th anniversary. So that was 2019. So, yeah.
So
2 years.
you've been here for 2 years, and a year and a half of it's been pandemic.
Yes.
Oh,
Well,
goodness.
you've been here for 1 year, at least in terms of starting as an interim Crossbridge minister.
Yes.
You started in the middle of the pandemic, and you are going to end in the middle, like
Still going on.
still going on. And you have yet to preach
It's gonna happen.
live.
It's happening.
Yes, it'll
Yeah.
happen. It'll
I
happen.
Got that extension? I will be preaching.
Otherwise, you would have just gone on that plane, and we would have never seen you preach.
Oh, so, Jeff, what are we doing here today?
Yeah, so this is, for us, we tend to submit like this annual report. We publish it for the whole church every single year during the anniversary service. I think it's like 47 pages long because it encapsulates like every ministry as far as I know. A lot of the larger ministries, there's translation, it covers all the stuff that's happened in the past year, and it's a lot, right? I'm not even sure how many Crossbridge members know about it, much less read it. And so, we do have like a small like page or two in that report that will kind of detail what we as Crossbridge have been doing the past year, kind of looking back, maybe looking forward a little bit. But we want to make that page available to Crossbridge. And so, they can just kind of read that section, or we can highlight that section. But the other thing that at least I wanted to do, especially as we've been going online and talking about all the different ways that we consume information and all the different ways that we can communicate that information through different mediums, is do something a little bit differently, right? And so that's what we're doing right now. That's why I asked you, like, hey, can you come and let's like talk through this annual report, and not just like, I don't envision for us to just be here just rattling off like attendance numbers and how many sermons did we preach this year, and list out every single sermon series that we did, but at least for us to reflect. There haven't been many opportunities perhaps for congregation members, for Crossbridge, to kind of to see what we're thinking. And as I was thinking about this, the benefit of this is that we're not doing this behind the pulpit.
Yes.
So hopefully there's a clear distinction between like this is not like, this is kind of just our reflections, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit unfiltered.
Uh-oh.
We'll see how much post-processing and editing there is. Well, we'll see. They won't see. But for us to reflect and for people to know, hey, this is kind of like how we're processing, how we're thinking about what God has been doing, the things that we did well, the things that we could still improve on, without it carrying the same weight as a sermon, right, on a Sunday morning, which it shouldn't, right? Because we're not necessarily, preaching the word of God right now. We're just kind of reflecting on the work of God in the past year. So, yeah, I mean, what was your thought when I kind of approached you about this?
Exciting, right? Because I wanted to put together a podcast where you could kind of like, it's this kind of the same feeling of like letting down your guard a little bit, like not having to put on my sermon voice, be crazy, do illustrations, but just actually just talk and not just like read a report, but like get behind that and just see how we're thinking about things. Because I wish I could like talk to every single person in CV and share how my year was and ask them how theirs was. And well, maybe I don't have time to do that, but it's like I want to do that.
20 something days left, so you could divide the
10 people a
congregation.
day,
10
right?
people a day, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it was just exciting to. I mean, even for you too, just to like, there hasn't been a lot of times where we've just got to sit and debrief and just like talk. And so I think I'm interested to hear what some of your highlights of the year, especially it's been a pandemic year. It's been a weird year. I would imagine serving in ministry. No, not imagine. It was a weird year.
Yeah.
But also saying like, what has God done, and what were some things that were exciting for you? So what were some things that were exciting for you in the pandemic?
Yeah, man. I think preaching was just a whole new experience, right? I mean, we talk about hoping that people can kind of see a different side of us and get a little bit more personal. And it was really hard to do that. I mean, you probably knew, right? We're trying to preach to a screen, or not to a screen, but to a camera, right? And there's literally no one to interact with. Yes. It's just dead space. And usually, you can kind of feel the sense in the room of where, playing off of the people, right? And we're not trying to be like stand-up comedians or anything like that, but there's something about preaching the word of God live that is so different than just recording a message.
Right.
But I would say that it has been kind of exciting, right? Because it's been challenging us to think about how we can, again, like I said before, kind of do things differently. Right. How can we make the word of God more accessible to people? And so, like, I remember, like, one of your recent sermons, like, you preached in, like, how many different locations or something like that?
I was 4. I went to the recording studio, the Charles River, Seaward Wall, Fort Seaward, up in Marblehead, and then I was also at Gordon Conwall. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, that reminded me of like all the Right Now media videos that ICF and Karis have been doing.
Exactly what my
where you had like David
was.
Platt like walking through the Shepherd Plains in Israel or whatever, and like talking through Psalm 23.
Right.
Except we're kind of just not in Israel and we're just doing Boston or Connecticut or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, just thinking about different ways to make the word of God accessible and to go about it creatively. Yeah.
Right. It's funny as you talk about like the feeling in the room, like as we preach. I remember some of the ones in the middle of winter when we were recording in the sanctuary at like 10:30 at night.
Oh man!
And like we forgot to tell, like to ask
to
for
reserve
heat
the
on.
room.
Yeah. So like, just being like shivering in the sanctuary and like we were sitting down too because we didn't know what we were doing yet, and we're still figuring things out, being like, I'm cold, and trying to preach the sermon with conviction.
Yeah, I remember. So at one point, because we've done different setups, right, for preaching, and I think earlier on, near the beginning, I was preaching on the steps, right?
Yes.
So, I got some feedback, right? People are like, oh, that's kind of cool. And that's kind of like more engaging or whatever. And it's true. Like, I think like at that time I felt like it felt a little bit weird for me to preach behind the pulpit just to a camera with no one there. Right. Yeah. It felt a little bit too formal. So I wanted to, be a little bit more intimate. Right. But another reason was because it was so cold. So
is that why you sat down?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know. That's why I started sitting down too.
Yes, because it's too cold and my toes are numb and my fingers are numb, and I couldn't get up, right? That way I don't have to move too much. But yeah, it was hard at some of those times because like I remember I think for one of the sermons, snot would keep coming out of my nose.
Oh my gosh.
And so, I'd preach like the intro and then it would come out and then I have to go up to hit, stop, delete it so that, and check the battery life so that there's enough battery, reset my iPad and the teleprompter, then go back to the X, make sure everything's lined up. Start again, and then more stuff would come out, and it's different because like if we were in person, people are away, like are farther apart, right? So I can probably just like really quickly, wipe my nose or something like that on my shirt or tissue or something, and it wouldn't be bad. But I think at that point we're recording much closer to my face. And so it would just be so awkward for me to just like close up shot. But yeah, just that. But I think the whole idea of like recording means like we can also redo things, which is both a blessing and a curse. I'm sure that like that was tough for worship too, or sermons.
It's such a different feeling to like be in front. Oh, I've only preached one sermon right in front of people. That was when I was installed, and that was an audience of 15 or 25,
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and so with when there's people, it's like there's no chances. When you make a mistake, you just roll with the punches. And then there were so many times. I'm glad we actually just deleted a lot of the memory card,
bloopers.
right, because like they aren't bloopers per se because they're not funny. It's just me being
just sad,
just me being angry, right?
Yeah.
Just being coming, come on, like so clean. It's like you're and then it's like the feeling of being like 15 minutes into a sermon, right? You make a small mistake and then you get in your head about it, and you're like, well, should I? It's like you keep talking, you keep trying to do the message, but you're like, should I just start over? Is it worth starting over? How big of a mistake it is? And you get so in your head, you lose track, and you're like, well, I guess I got to start over now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the challenges of going fully digital, right? Fully online, is that I think there's that temptation for us to want to be perfectionist. Perfect. Especially given the culture of our church, right? Because we're all like, we've been very blessed with a lot of smart people, a lot of hardworking, intelligent people. But, the other side of that is, hey, when we do something, we're going to do it really well. We're going to do it ourselves. We're going to put in like 120% effort. I think that goes from like, it includes preaching, it includes our worship videos. And I think there's that challenge of how do we preach well? How do we lead worship well? In a way that like it's not distracting, right? That helps not viewers again, right? That's the danger is calling them viewers, but congregation members, right? Participants in the worship to engage with that. Like we don't want to distract with like poor quality or anything like that. But the flip side is we don't want to focus so much on getting it right. That we forget about what is most important.
Well, that was the same thing for like, doing worship sets as well. Like one of the things that I really loved so much about, well, I didn't love about the pandemic, but one of the byproducts of was just the diversity of like the different videos that people, especially in the beginning, as we were all trying to figure out what to do, how to put together like a worship video. Like it was everyone doing something different every week. And I loved how diverse it was, how different it was. And then like, it's funny that you mentioned like not trying to be distracting, because like I feel like for the most part, like I think people settled into kind of like, this is our routine, this is how we want to do it. And for me, I was like, I want to do something different every time, which ended up being a lot of work, but was like really, really fun just to try to make it totally different, try to do something. Because I was like, I also, it's that balance of like, I don't want to be distracting, but there's also a part of it where I want to be engaging as well. And I think that was part of the difficulty of being online, where it's like, I don't want the stuff I do to be a gimmick. I don't want you to just be entertained for the sake of being entertained. I want to serve. But I also don't want to just do the same thing again and again and again.
Yeah. And I think that was helpful to some extent too, because when we're in the middle of the pandemic, at least in my experience, it helped if you were changing things,
right?
Because things could get very easily monotonous or tiring or bored or the same old thing for people just watching online. That we don't want to change for the sake of change, right? There's this purpose behind it. There's intentionality. I think one of the cool things too was, because you were talking about worship, was seeing how the different worship teams were made up. I think one of the highlights was seeing all the different people. I think Bow-Nan sometimes made those videos where you had even people from different congregations, or different ages,
or bringing families too.
Bringing families or singles or couples or children. And I think it varied depending on what service we were talking about, right? I think there was like, maybe we did one for Mother's Day, or we did one for
Yeah.
you know, anniversary service. I don't remember. It's been a long year.
Then there was a lot of them.
And there was a lot of them. Credit to Bow-Nan and, you know, all the worship team members, actually, all the live stream. I think they worked so hard grinding out videos and editing and learning new skills. One of the things that I wanted to do was to invite Bow-Nan and his family to come so we could kind of hear about their story and how they got involved, how the kids got involved, right? Because I think it's really cool. It's a great testimony to discipleship, to serving together as a family. One of the funny things that I recall from doing the live stream is that at one point early on, I was still preaching live, right? I wasn't doing pre-recorded videos. And so we would have the presider always preside live.
I remember that.
And then they would turn it over to me, right? Who's preaching. And then I don't know why it's Bow-Nan, but in Bow-Nan, in my mind, I always think of Bow-Nan because he was always like, he reads the scripture passage and then he's over to you, Jeff.
Right. Every time.
Minister Jeff. Every time. And we kind of stopped doing that when we reopened because it's weird. But I get to do it now. And so it's my turn to kind of throw it back to Bow-Nan. So I'm going to do this. Over to you, Bow-Nan.
Right. Thank you guys so much for being here, coming and being in our little recording setup over here. Let me give you a little bit of background about why we wanted to ask you. So, as we were reflecting on the year, I was thinking about, you know, some of the highlights from our year were like doing like the Yuki Bear videos. You guys remember those? And and a big inspiration for my Yuki Bear videos was you guys, when you guys did your worship sets, because you incorporated lots of people, you did things that were friendly for your kids, you brought your own kids into it, and for all that time, I was like, I don't know how to do that for my worship videos, but I wanted to be able to do something for families, do something for kids, and so we were wondering, just what is the story behind that? How did you guys have that idea? How did that happen?
Yeah, so actually it's really interesting. When we started the video process, recording, we had all these like delusions of grandeur, how great it was going to be, and we took our computers out and started recording, and it sounded terrible. And so we started spending a lot of time just like practicing and, you know, getting the right setup and things like that. And every time we did this, it would take like hours and hours, and we basically tell our kids, hey, you know, go to the room and, you know, color or draw, you know, and play. Yeah. And it would just take a lot of time. And I just remember this one time where, you know, after we had done that, and then, you know, we put the kids to sleep, we saw a note, and it was Amelia that actually wrote us a note. She wrote a piece of paper. It was on the table, and it said,
remember that.
"You remember it? I have the note." But it was like, "Mommy and Daddy, I feel left out," and it was, it really cut my heart, and it, you know, Alice as well. And we're like, you know, like what's the point? Like if we do such a great job and, you know, have this great video, have this great music and worship and all this thing, and, you know, as a family we're not pleasing God, you know, we're making, you know, the kids feel left out, you know, like what's the point of it, right? And so after that we tried really hard to at least incorporate them in one of the videos or something like that, and thankfully, I mean, they enjoy singing, they enjoy doing a lot of this stuff, and so it kind of worked out, you know, nicely. So we try every week to at least have them in one.
Computer kept crashing.
Yeah, I know.
Wow, they're learning.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. I think that's an amazing testimony because, you know, I think before it made it. Sometimes it feels like we have to choose between our family or serving, right? But I think, you know, your story and kind of the example that you guys had is a great way to show that no, we don't necessarily have to split the two.
Yeah.
You know, so
I think it's important to be intentional. I think that's the thing, right? I think it's not going to work out for every family. Like,
Sure.
I mean, some kids are like, I don't want to do this, and that's fine. Right? But I think it's being intentional with what you do and making sure that pleases God. And if it's with the family, if it's like, you know, with one partner, with, you know, it's just I think there's different combinations. It doesn't have to be, you know, but you know, it worked out.
yeah. What are some of the things that you guys learned as you guys were serving together as a family?
What did we learn?
What did you learn? What did you learn?
Other than Alice is a closet diva.
Yeah. I think the whole church.
we don't find out.
Yes.
And the girls can sing harmony.
Oh yeah, that was
much better than we
I
can.
learned from them. There's a couple of times.
Really?
She became better at me than me at harmonizing. So a couple times I'm like, Amelia, can you like sing this part?
Wow. Delegation. Nice.
It's funny. I think there was one video where Eric Mui was asking, he's like, "Oh, that must have taken a lot of takes for the kids to do." And I was thinking, that took a lot of takes for me and Alice to do. The kids just banged it out in like a single take.
That's amazing.
Yeah, no, I think it's a learning experience for all of us. So.
Yeah. Or can I ask Amelia and Abby a question?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. What were some things that you really enjoyed during these worship videos?
Putting
Helping Daddy make the video.
Yeah.
helping Daddy make the videos. Oh yeah, Amelia.
I did like half of it, and then all you had to do was like finish the ending of it.
Oh yeah, she was putting in the lyrics.
She helped us with subtitling and things like that.
Wow. That's
Did
amazing.
you like doing that?
That was fun.
How about learning instruments or anything? Like
Playing
that?
the guitar.
Yeah, you want to talk about that? No, you're a little shy. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're so grateful for you and for like all the other people that served during the live stream. It's just, I think looking back, everyone was scrambling and trying to learn like how to do all of this like on their own. And it seemed like everyone kind of had their own process by the end of it. Like you guys probably, I feel like you guys had like your process, your thing down. Every week it was like, or every time you guys led.
Yeah.
How long did it take for you guys to kind of get into the groove of like, okay, it's our turn to serve. Like we know what we're gonna do. We know like where we're gonna stand and everything.
Yeah. So it took a while at first to kind of get all that worked out.
I think in the beginning, like we started doing it like 2-3 weeks ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
It usually takes about 3 weeks ahead of time. But I think like we found a good process which just like start with the piano in the back. I mean, it's like the same thing every week, right? Piano in the background.
Your hands. Your hands.
And then like we'd record everything according to that track, right?
Okay.
And everything was like, and then like the clapping and all this. I think everybody does pretty similar things, and then like a couple of things we learned, like we'd get like all these like the group recordings and like it's just like, oh, like recordings are not very good, but like the thing we found out was like it doesn't matter once you put everybody together, it sounds awesome.
It sounds great.
So people would email us, I don't know if this is good, and I'm like, I don't care, just use your video camera, and most of our recordings were just on our phones, and then we had one mic that we used to record, so it was, and we were like, oh, it's good enough, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Do you have any other things you wanted to ask them?
Nope.
Yeah.
Remember the dinosaurs in the second video?
Yeah,
The dinosaurs.
They're a fan of the dinos, and I think they're like Easter eggs you put in for the kids.
Yeah. Might have to go back and kind of rewatch some of those videos to look for the dinosaurs.
Well, it was funny too when we got videos like that first time. I don't know if it was you, Kola, where it was like at the end, when everybody was faded out, there was like it's like, oh, that's my stomach.
Oh yeah, that was our favorite.
That was one of the first group videos guys together.
We're like,
everybody is.
Oh man,
It's just like all these little things that are.
my stomach growling.
Did we keep that in? I think we kept
We kept that in.
right?
We kept it in.
Yeah.
Oh, that was amazing.
But there was all these like little Easter eggs that we put in and that we had, that people submitted.
Even as hopefully at some point the pandemic will be over and we start to reopen and stuff, like I'm sure there'll be many opportunities for us to utilize videos in the future. But even if for you guys, I'm wondering like how has this whole experience maybe like change the way you guys spend time together in the future, or maybe change the way you guys worship together, even if you guys don't have the same opportunities to make videos in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they're together now with us, at least for the worship time.
Sure.
So that's at least for the live stream time. I think that's been really good. And then they have their Sunday schools, throughout. But I think it's more just I don't know, Alice can chime in, but I think like it's more like the concept of like, again, being intentional. Like if I'm going to serve here, like is it just me going to serve and it's just like kids, you're at home, or Alice, you're at home, it's more like can we think of a way to grow us as an entire family. So it's more like, it's less like, oh, we're gonna do more worship videos or anything like that, but it's more like can we be intentional with the family and kind of making sure that we're not doing one-offs, but as a family we can grow together.
Yeah.
Right? So
Grow together in Christ. Amen. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for coming and spending time with us and sharing your story with the rest of Crossbridge. Yeah. Thanks so much.
thank you.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right, say bye, guys. Jeff, over to you.
Thanks, Bow-Nan. All right. So we were talking about preaching before, right?
Yeah,
before we had Bow-Nan kind of and his family share. We, from our report, I mentioned we preached through, it was just crazy. Like we preached through 3 sermon series.
Do you have any sermon kind of highlights for you?
Well, one of my earlier memories from these set of kind of sermon series is we were preaching through Micah, right?
Right.
And I think that, I don't know too many people that know this, but so when we pick sermons, right? Like Dr. Arthurs has been our interim Crossbridge minister, and he's been kind of helping with scheduling the preaching roster and even designing some of these preaching schedules and dividing up the books, right? But he always values the rest of us, like our input, right? And so he had asked me like, hey, like what are some things that, like some books that you think we should preach on next? And in my mind, I had actually thought about Malachi, but I'll just chalk it up to God's providence, right? That somehow my fingers, Freudian fingers or whatever, typed Micah.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but that's what came out, right? And I didn't even realize it until later on when he chose Micah, and I was like, why are we preaching through Micah? Like, which one of us suggested it? But I think in hindsight, it was coming at a time where our church had just put out kind of like our racial justice kind of reflection, speaking on the deaths of like George Floyd and others, and talking about racial injustice and the need for us as a church to think more and engage more with these types of issues. And so I think from that Micah series, there's one time, and we we're talking earlier about recording like in the middle of the night and all that stuff. So I had come, I think it might have been like 11 p.m. or close to 12 or something like that, and I was driving up the driveway, and I saw some police lights, right? And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, why are there police with the lights on at our church in the middle of the night? Now, part of me was just really focused on trying to get the sermon done.
Right,
So
yeah,
actually, I was pulling into Old Spring Street, and I had a decision: should I go to the police first and figure out what's going on, or should I go to the church office and grab all these lights and mics and all that stuff? So I ended up going to the church office and grabbing all these things. Now, I think I had a realization as I was walking out. I was like, wow, if I maybe if I looked different, or they were, the police saw me and they saw me coming out with all this expensive camera, lighting, equipment.
Right.
Like they might have a different impression, right?
Yeah.
But no one said anything. And I loaded up into my car, and then I came out of that driveway from the church office up the main road to the main building. And I stopped by the one police officer with one car, and he had told me, oh yeah, there were some kids that were just kind of loitering and everything. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I told them, hey, look, if you need me for anything, I want to make sure the kids are safe. Just let me know, right? So I went to the sanctuary, ended up setting up the tripod and camera and whatever. By now it's pretty late, right? And the cops, I think, are there. I walk out, and I think this was another point of realization for, if you want to call it privilege, you can call it privilege, or just like people giving me the benefit of the doubt, because I am coming out of a building, and it's dark. There's not really any lights on. And I don't know if it was because I look Chinese and they know this is probably like Crossbridge is part of a Chinese church or anything, but it didn't seem like they were nervous at all. They didn't seem like they questioned me at all. And I spoke to them, spoke to the kids, because I feel bad, for the kids, because I don't want them to associate church with being in trouble with the cops, or being kicked off, right? Like the last thing is I would have invited them in, but that would have been strange to invite them into the church building at in the middle of the night.
Scary.
Yes. Then they would really associate nightmares and horror films and stuff with their church, which I don't want. But I spoke to one of the kids and said, hey, look, like it's not an issue. Just want to make sure you guys are safe. Don't worry about it or anything. But I think for me, given that the context, and I think I was preaching a Micah sermon, like right after that, I couldn't ignore what my experience was, what I was preaching on, and how my experiences might have been different than many other brothers and sisters, whether they're Christian or not, right, in the rest of the world, whether it be in our country or elsewhere. So that was like a huge, I don't want to say epiphany, but just I think God was kind of speaking very personally through the very passages that I'm preaching in the sermon series that I'm preaching during that time.
Wow.
But yeah, that was a big one. On a much heavier note.
That's a story.
Yeah. I don't know if you had any from any of the sermons, or if you remember anything.
It wasn't the sermon itself, but when there was when there was a lot of attacks on Asian Americans in that time, and just thinking about what is our church's response to that. There's a lot of ways where I think we can be a little bit slow to act, or a little bit slow, with process and stuff in the church. But at least with that, we were like, well, this means a lot to us. It hits us. And there's some people at church who feel, as it hits us, it feels unsafe. And really, and wanting to address that. And like, it fell to me a little bit. And I was like, oh, I guess like, this is something that is it means a lot to me, because like with the murder of George Floyd, it was the first time for me that I really considered what it meant for me to be Black, like just genuinely. Yeah. And I was like, recognizing and realizing that, oh, there actually is a little bit of like a fear and a little bit of a stress of just simply driving. And like I worry too sometimes. I'm like, well, if the police ever come and they're paroling and they see me walk out of the office, I need to be like, oh, wait a minute, I'm a minister here. But then also too, with Asian American violence, I'm like, well, that's my other half. Yeah, as well. That's part of who you are, right? Too. And so that's both halves of me, right? That's just, I'm Asian American. You got hit twice. I'm African. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that like it fell to me, but then I thought, well, actually, it's strangely appropriate that just to be able to just deliver that message of saying, because of Christ, we care for our brothers and sisters who are hurting.
Take it seriously when God says in Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our image. Because that means all of humanity, every race, every ethnicity, male and female, are imbued with the image of God.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really impactful moment that like we might not have had just because if we weren't in the pandemic, you know. One of the first big get-togethers that we had in the middle of the pandemic when things were getting better was having the baptism at the beach.
Yeah, at Pleasure Bay Beach at Castle Island. And that, I think, was one of the largest gatherings we had up to that point in the middle of the pandemic.
That's right.
And one of the things that always stick in my mind, and maybe in the minds of those who got baptized, was, again, not many of congregation members may know this, but there was jellyfish.
There was a lot of jellyfish. Because originally when we waded in the water to try and check it out as we were scoping the area, we were like, oh, this water is cold, but it's, you know, good. It's workable. And then we discovered one jellyfish, which subsequently you and Taylor took.
Yes, we moved it. We tried to rescue it and move it down. I'm not sure how successful we were. We moved it to the end, down to the end of the beach, right? We hope that jellyfish is doing okay, but we're not quite sure. I think so. But then when we came back, all of you guys are shouting, there's so many
jellyfish.
There's so many more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can see in like we have that baptism highlight video. Some of them are literally like taking these giant steps.
Yeah,
and you can see they're like taking their time slowly, watching where they plant their feet.
Yeah.
And I think even because you and I were baptizing some of them and dunking them, we had to watch out where some of the jellyfish were coming.
Yeah.
And they just like dunk them in a certain way that, you know, we don't want them to go under the water and then the jellyfish goes over their face and then we bring them up and then, you know, they have a jellyfish hat or something like that.
There was one of the youth too who was like when we baptized him, like a little like quaff of his hair didn't go underwater.
Yeah.
So you can see a little bit like Jen and Taylor being like, get under there, you know, being like, why am I being pushed
Full
down?
immersion, right? Like fully immersed.
Yeah. So you might have missed like a hair or two, but
yeah, fully wet. But yeah, I think that was a huge highlight because it was a witness too, because we had people coming up to us before and after, like, hey, like, what are you guys doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you guys here? And I think even afterwards, because it wasn't just, the ceremony wasn't just dunking people into the water. There are moments where you prayed.
Right.
And I did like an intro, right? I explained what baptism is, what membership is.
Right. Yeah.
But as I was speaking, you know, it wasn't just the 80 or so people from our church listening.
Yeah.
There were people, you know, just getting their tan on and waiting in the water outside who are also listening in. And so in that way, it was also a way for us to proclaim the gospel and the significance of baptism and what it means to be part of the church. It's something that we couldn't do before when we were in the sanctuary doing baptism. So I'm not sure how often we'll do it again. You know, it's always these things with outdoor things. It's always dependent on weather, right?
Yeah.
So that's always something that we can't always plan for. But I think it was really encouraging and wonderful to be able to be out there in the world baptizing people. But I think other things that we did too was I think that the men's barbecue, the CB lunch, that's been really wonderful. Just seeing people come together, because I feel like we're really at our best when we start leaning into the things that really make us who we are as Crossbridge. And again, all of that is under the umbrella of our true mission as a church, which is to make his name known, to further his kingdom, to proclaim the gospel. But there's like distinctives about us as a congregation that separates us out from, you know, any other church down the road. And I think bringing people from different generations, like bridging, you know, playing off of our name, Crossbridge, bridging cultures, bridging generations. Like, I think that's a wonderful aspect, because we had the CB fall the kickoff picnic, the lunch, the barbecue,
CB retreat too.
Oh yeah, CB retreat. How was that for you because you attended.
CB retreat was really nice. It was good to see people that I haven't got to see in a while, to be together. Oh, also, what is that place called? Pilgrim Pines.
Yeah,
is beautiful. Like genuinely a gorgeous spot. Like the first morning was like foggy.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, oh, this is creepy. But then like the sun came out, the weather was beautiful, and to be able just to spend time together with people as a church, more than just a few hours at church, was, you know, and getting was special. And then also getting to spend time with people I normally don't get to see, and like getting to know them, getting to play with our kids a little bit too, and just hearing and yeah, just being together as a community. It felt so nice. I think it's what I've missed probably most in the pandemic, and what I really enjoy now about getting together is being and being with people again. I remember the first time where I led worship for the church in our and as we reopened again, we were at 25 or 50 people.
Yeah.
And hearing people's voices was like, oh, it's all been worth it. Because so much of the pandemic, I was just doing worship at home. I was putting together videos on my own, or being in my office, and leading worship for Cares and ICF. And it's just me on a Zoom call or on a video, and I can't hear anyone sing, and which is fine, right? It's like I know that God is working in people's hearts, but to be together as a church, and hear people sing to the Lord together. It's so special, right? I think that's one of those things I just don't take for granted anymore when I'm at church. It's hearing the voices of people praising the Lord together is incredible. It's an incredible feeling. And I think it was that extended even further at CB Retreat, where you just get to be with people and talk with people and God's people and talk about the messages and talk about their lives and get to know new people. That's something that's really special. I think you'll really cherish.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the tensions that come about with this gift of technology, right? That we can now do things we didn't before, right? We can reach people that we didn't have before. I think we had newcomers that discovered our live stream, watched us, and then when we reopened, came in person. I was like, oh, how'd you find out about our church? Oh, well, we Googled you, and then we checked out your live stream. And I guess we were enticing enough or interesting enough, let's say, for them to come check us out in person. But yeah, I think one of the tensions is there's all these benefits that come with technology. But at the same time, we might say with this technology, well, the church is not a building, right? It's not a place, it's a people. Which is totally true, right? When we talk about the ecclesia, right? The Greek for assembly, right? In the Bible, the church, it's a people, not always just this building. At best, maybe like a small house, right, where they gather. But I think that the thing is, it's true that the church is not a place; it's a people. But I would add more nuance to that, and I would add that the church is a gathered people. When we look at the church described particularly in the New Testament, it's a people that are gathered together physically in a place so that they can do some of the things that they might not be able to do if they were virtual. Sure, I mean, we use Zoom for office hours or to call people, but I probably can say for a lot of the people, we're all Zoomed out.
Real.
Yeah, all the meetings and all the people have to deal with Zoom at work, and so the church is this gathered people, and when we're gathered, we can really come together, sing congregationally, lift you up because now you can hear our voices. I don't think it was just the worship; it was just the responsive reading,
right? Yeah,
too.
Yeah. Oh man,
because otherwise I'm at home and it's just me on the couch
reading.
Me and Natalie, or me and Janet, or me and Wen, and whoever else is presiding. It's a strange thing, right? Maybe you had this with worship, I preach, right? So we pre-record and then we play it on Sunday, and I'm at home in the middle of the pandemic, and I'm just watching myself preach, and that's it's the most jarring experience. I took a selfie of me on TV with this. I don't remember what my face was. It was probably just like this. Who is this guy preaching? What is he saying? Why are we listening to him?
Yeah.
Was it strange for you to like kind of see yourself and worship led by yourself?
Right. So because I knew the contours of every song, because like the audio editing was just like you just listen to a song like 40 times. So it's like every contour, every beat, everything that's gonna happen in the song. And then when you do the video editing, it's just repeat, 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 repeat. So like at that point, I'm like, I'm tired of hearing myself sing the song. And like for the sermons too, it's like it's like the material, but then I'm also editing my own videos too.
Sure.
And so like I've listened to my sermon 4 or 5 times already, and it's just like one more time for the road,
All right, so I think we can start wrapping up, but I think one of the things I kind of want to ask you about too is what do you, because you're leaving like really soon.
3-ish weeks. 3-ish weeks from this recording. When this comes out, like a week or 2.
Yeah, that's crazy. Just like what are you gonna miss about Crossbridge, and what do you hope to see that will continue to happen even after you leave?
So I remember when you interviewed me in the very beginning, when I was still in Taiwan, and you asked me, it's like, what do you?
You were in quarantine in Taiwan.
When I was in quarantine in Taiwan, right? You asked me like, what excites you about Crossbridge? Why are you excited to be here?
The year that I have been here has been a year where I felt so welcomed. Even from the first time I came, and I was sitting in the back right of the service, and I had no idea who any of you were. There were a lot of people who came to welcome me, not just the greeters, and I really value that and love that in the church.
And it was always the people, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that doesn't change, right? Like the people in the beginning were warm and were welcoming to me in, a way that was surprising for me, right? Just from the first time I stepped in here as a total stranger, just being welcomed. I was hiding in the back corner. And even as a minister, people who would reach out to me and say, hey, your message encouraged me, or just like, I'm praying for you, or I'm rooting for you. I think that, there's this sense, even in COVID, of community and people having my back, people caring for me, people genuinely loving me, right? And like, that was, that was what sustained me, in COVID and having to be alone for a lot of the year. And, we weren't in the office, we weren't meeting in person. Mm-hmm. It was those messages, not just from Caris and ICF, though they did encourage me a lot, but from all over the church. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what I'll miss the most. Again, it has to be people, but really just like this community that's so loving, inviting, and caring. And I think that's what I hope as we continue. Like, I think that there's some stuff that you said that's you're thinking about the future, you're thinking about vision. That's clear. And like I feel like there's going to be, we're going to be moving into a new season. Mm-hmm. What does it mean to be Crossbridge? Who are we as a church? But I feel like what part of our core identity was a group of people who genuinely loved the people that are here. They cared a lot for the people that are here through all of our faults and mistakes and hurt that we've gone through. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of turnover and a lot of that, but over all these years, over all my time that I've been here, been a group of people that have loved me well, that love other people well and care genuinely. So I believe that'll continue, but I think that's probably my encouragement too, is continue to be a church that loves their people well and cares well for their people.
Yeah. It's deep. Yeah. I think that resonates a lot, for sure. And when you talk about people welcoming you and bringing you in, that is a part of even my own experience growing up in this church and having gone through the different ministries, that is at its core, part of what we as a congregation kind of do well. And you mentioned, gave a sneak peek into what we're looking forward to, right? And I think new season is a good way to put it, because it puts us on a good step forward. It helps us to look forward to what God has in store for us, because we recently added Minister Pat as our Crossbridge Fellowship pastor, and so now we have while I'm so grateful for you, Kola, that we can have like this partnership relationship, and Dr. Arthur's like your titles were always interim, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And that was, you guys did an amazing job, and it was also challenging, right? Because it's hard to lead when those in leadership change every single year or every other year. But with this new season, right, this is going to be the leadership, at least the pastoral leadership for Crossbridge moving forward, at least, for several years, right? For the foreseeable future. And that gives me a lot of hope because, all right, let's get to work, right? I think we are in the process of thinking through like revisiting, what is our mission? Why does Crossbridge exist? Who are we? Who are we supposed to reach out to? If Crossbridge overnight, just stopped existing, what would we lose out on? What would our community lose out on? What would the world lose out on? And I think answering some of these questions will give us as a congregation greater clarity about who we are and where we should be going, and how do we do so in a way that reflects God's will, his plan, and his calling upon, the local church, specifically, CBCGB and Crossbridge as the ministry. So yeah, I think that's kind of like a brief sneak peek. And I'm really hoping that like, at some point when you head off to Taiwan and maybe come back to visit, because you are one of our supported missionaries, that the next time you come back, if you're on like furlough or, anything like that, you stop by and you're going to see, I think hopefully you'll not just see some of the things that I mentioned coming into fruition, but you'll also see a lot of the seeds that you planted, like your fingerprint on the lives of the members of this church. I think you've done so much in 1 year: worship leading, editing, producing videos, preaching, caring, leading Bible study, all that stuff, right?
Yuki Bear. Gotta throw that in.
Yes, Yuki Bear was amazing. I don't even know if we had enough time to talk about that, but yeah, just your fingerprint and like you've been such an impact on people's lives. And the next time you come back, I hope you'll be able to be encouraged by your ministry, that you started well and that you finished well here at CB. So
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah,
It's been a crazy year.
it has been a crazy year. We're not over, but by God's will, we are being sustained by his grace and his mercy.
Yeah.
So
Here's to the next year.
yeah, here's the next year. Maybe I'll have you come back next year as a special guest.
Like, what happens?
Cool.
All right.
Thanks, Kola.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for doing this too.